And the question everyone is asking is, when is Alpha 22 launching? Never. You heard it here first. Never. Because there is no more Alpha 22. It has been rebranded as 7 Days to Die version 1.0. We are finally going gold after 12 years. When does this happen? As I will cover in the video, Richard was highlighting an experimental version should be coming in May, with everything following on to that. But watch on.
With more than a decade of development, 7 Days has accomplished more than our team or critics could have ever imagined. But we think the team, community, and game are ready for the next steps. So when does 1.0 launch? We're currently planning for an experimental release in late May.
Announced recently by the Funpimps, what are the implications and what does this really mean? Let us go through and analyze. While we do so, consider your own thoughts and put them down in the comment section below. Give me maybe one positive and at most one negative thing that strikes you. Be fair, it ain't all bad, right? There are a bunch of things happening and the Funpimps have done a pretty good job of addressing a number of them. Except of course why they've decided to go to version 1.0 and not continue as alpha. We can speculate, but I would say there's likely many factors out of which the console release is probably a fairly big one, with Microsoft and Sony preferring full game launches to early access games that might or might not launch. But let's look at what the Funpimps are saying. They're saying we've been developing for nearly 12 years and they've had 20 large-scale early access releases. That's probably about right. And then further down here they say rather than keep 7 Days to Die in further alphas, we think it's time to leave early access and officially announce our 1.0 launch. So they're pretty much just saying that, well, we feel it's ready for launch, but they don't really touch on exactly why. For those who've been around a while, you know that a bunch of things were planned for launch before, such as bandits, the story, those small little details. We also know that Alpha 22 was supposed to be a short cycle to quickly get bandits in because they were not quite ready in Alpha 21.
I'm Richard Hunick, co-founder of the Funpimps and creator of 7 Days to Die. And I'm going to share the details about 7 Days to Die, leaving early access, and the launch of version 1.0. Up to this point, we've referred to 1.0 as Alpha 22, but internally, our plan has always been for Alpha 22 to be version 1.
Now, I'm not here to throw shade on the Funpimps, but either they have been misleading the community by saying they intended a short A22 to get bandits in, or they're misleading the community by saying A22 was always the intended 1.0 version. For Richard to be saying that it was always intended as version 1.0 really makes little sense in view of past communication, especially without the big features of bandits and story, which were always communicated as being part of the launch version. Now with that said, I don't think it really matters, but I'm not the only one who picks up on inconsistent communication. I would have much preferred the Funpimps saying, due to ABC, we're going to launch 1.0 even if we're not ready. We apologize, but we do commit to continuing developing it as part of the roadmap, but we're also announcing, clear, to the point, own up to past mistakes, and let's move forward. Still, like I said, whether it's Alpha 22, 23 version 1 or 2, what really should matter is the game that we receive and the support and future development. And the Funpimps are saying that they do have future plans and deadlines. Well, I'm pretty sure none of us believe any word about deadlines, considering the Funpimps have been really poor at meeting them in the past. Still, the commitment to support PC and console both is encouraging. So Alpha 22 will turn to 1.0 and upwards, and we'll be able to access old alphas on Steam, which is a great feature that other storefronts actually sadly lack. The nice thing is that the Funpimps does straight out mention that they are working on all the Kickstarter goals and promised features. So when is it all coming? This is the million-dollar question everyone asks. Fortunately, we get some specific information too.
So when does 1.0 launch? We're currently planning for an experimental release in late May and a stable 1.0 launch in June. We'll have exact release dates as we get closer.
Show of hands, when Richard says experimental in May and stable June, how many people believe that's likely? No one? No one? Anyone out there? Now on to a somewhat controversial topic and move. The Funpimps are planning for a price increase, and this is actually fairly common as games leave early access and are offered as full games. However, 7 Days to Die is not a full game at 1.0. It's still missing significant pieces. Furthermore, they're increasing the price to $45, which is almost double the current 25 on Steam. While a slight increase of 20 or 25% is one thing, almost doubling is not. And even if it was a complete game with all the promised content, I would still have said it's nuts to price it at 45. I've been saying for a fair while now that all these great survival games are often priced more than reasonably and could actually use a price bump. But while 30 might have been high if reasonable, 45 is far too high for a 12-year-old game that's not even complete. The central part, however, is somewhat highlighted. They in particular want the PC version to cost the same as console, which could have been accomplished by launching the console at the lower price point of the PC, at, $30, $35. But, of course, the FunPimps wants that extra cash, I guess.
With the launch of Stable 1.0, the current retail price of the game will increase to match the cost of the new console edition, which we'll cover later. If you currently own 7 Days to Die on PC or purchase it before 1.0's launch, then nothing will change. You will still get all major free updates coming. The only real change is that anyone who has not purchased the game by the launch of 1.0 will have to purchase it at a new price.
The long and short of the price increases, like anything that increases in price, if you already have the game, no impact. If you want to buy it after increase, you pay more. But you are buying an incomplete game as is with ambitions of free updates, but it also highlights DLC and expansions which could be paid for content coming out before we actually have all the promised features. What about the console?
The number one comment we hear on social media is, when is the new 7 Days to Die console version coming out? Folks, you won't have to wait much longer. The game looks great and runs surprisingly smooth. And that means 7 Days to Die PC 1.0 Stable will be the launch version for consoles. We are working on the exact dates, but know that it's coming soon after 1.0 launch on PC. Consoles will launch digitally only, and certain features like crossplay and generating additional random gen worlds may come in post-launch patches.
The console version will be the same as the PC version and launch at some point after PC has been released into 1.0. This of course could change, but it seems reasonable. It needs to be a stable version on PC first, then it needs to be certified by Microsoft and Sony, and then it can be launched on the console storefronts as well. Crossplay is one of the features which apparently works right now, but does require some processing at Microsoft and Sony side to authenticate, approve, or whatever. Hopefully this is something that they get done. The old 7 Days to Die game will be delisted. It will remain for people who have purchased it, but it will no longer be sold. Pity, the couch co-op was good in that version. As a bonus though, they hope to give a discount to existing console game owner if possible. There will be some differences in settings for the PC and console versions, even though the game itself will be the same. This is mostly due to performance limitations that they're trying to work around. For instance, random gen will not be available on console on launch, but it will be enabled through a patch when it's working sufficiently. Instead, they'll be packaging a collection of pre-generated maps to keep people occupied. Level and world editor will not be enabled. Those are not really part of the game anyway, they are really add-ons. Dedicated server connectivity will also not be enabled at launch for console, just peer-to-peer. I've also heard that, for instance, 8K maps will be the max, as well as 4-player co-op. Likely something which is continually looked at, but due to the performance requirement, one could imagine that a console-hosted game has certain limitations such as the map size and number of players, whereas if the game was hosted on a PC, then console players could connect through crossplay and play accordingly without having the same limitations. We will see. Nothing changes and everything changes depending on perspective. For PC players, it's a new version, labeling is different, but just another version. For console, it is a huge step forward to actually get the real 7 Days to Die game finally. And maybe within the next 6 to 12 months, we'll get to see enough that will excite everyone, not just console players, but PC alike. If you're curious about my more in-depth look at the roadmap, check out my video that I made last week about the whole 1.0 and going gold. What do you think about this whole 1.0 launch? Why not tell me in the comments below? I'll be reading them all. See you in the next video.